Do you guys also feel as if every day you're cosplaying as a human? Hello, Carla here. I'm an autistic psychologist, and on today's video, we're going to talk about what is autism. And as I promised you in my latest video, I'm going to do so from both perspectives, science and my own experience as an autistic person. Let's start with science. Since I will be making a specific video talking about the history of autism, for this one I'm just gonna give you the very basics. Like, when was the word autism first said? Well, it was said by the Swiss psychiatrist Eugen Bleuler in 1911 in his book Dementia Praecox. The original term was in German and it was autismus. It comes from the Greek auto, meaning self, and the ism is used to create nouns that determine a tendency. Autism would be tendency to the self, so tendency to one's own. Now let's get into some autistic drama, shall we? So we have this man, Leo Kanner, and in 1943 he published an article talking about 11 cases that he was studying of children with more or less the same symptoms. Now fast forward a year and we have Asperger's. Sound familiar, that one? We have Hans Asperger releasing a very similar article about a very similar group of children that he had in his clinic. I know what you're thinking. Oh my god, Asperger copied Kanner's homework. But let me tell you, it's more complicated than that, because it is said that Asperger was lecturing about his findings of these kids 5 years prior to Leo Kanner's article. There's a lot more, but again, that will be another video. What's important for this one is that you know these two people, Leo Kanner and Hans Asperger. So we have all these people researching, right? But what is all of this research for? Well, we use it to create something like this. This is the DSM. More specifically, its 5th version. So this little thing is the Diagnostic Statistic Manual for Mental Disorders. It was written by the APA, also known as the American Psychiatric Association. This book contains every mental illness together with any other disorder that has anything to do with the brain. So this little book also has a lot of history regarding autism, but for the sake of saving up time, we're only going to focus about the difference between this one, the 5th one, and the previous one. This little guy was born in 2013, which is not far away from now. Before that, the classification of autism was, well, a mess. Do you know that drawer that you have that whenever you don't know what to do with something you just got, you just chuck it in that drawer? And right now, if you had to name every single item there to save your life, you could not do it. So this was a little bit how the situation with autism was before the DSM-5 came out. The APA had established a category called pervasive developmental disorders, and under that category fell a lot of different disorders like autistic disorder and Asperger's disorder. But everything changed when this guy came to life. Basically, they cleaned the drawer. They realized that what they were talking as different disorders, it was actually the same thing. And that's how the term the autistic spectrum disorder appeared in life. So now that we know how we came here, let's actually dive into the main question. What is autism? We're going to follow this little friend. Autism is a neurodevelopmental disorder. This means it starts manifesting in the early age of development. For example, it may appear before even the kid starts going to school. I think this is a great moment to talk about how autism is not an illness. Autistic people, we're fine, questionable, but we're not ill. Autism cannot be cured because if there's not an illness, there's nothing for you to cure. It is considered a disorder. I personally prefer condition, but again, that's probably gonna be another video. So how does the DSM-5 classify autism? So we have 2 main symptoms in autism. Symptom number 1, difficulty with social interaction, social communication. Examples: making friends, making eye contact, responding to conversations or starting them. These are just examples, there's way more. Symptom number 2, autistic people present restrictive and repetitive, both interest and behaviors. Examples of that can be the need of a routine, fixated interest with abnormal intensity. It's not enough if you just really like something. I'm gonna give you an example. The people who know me are laughing right now. So I watched this film 19 times before I stopped counting in the same year. I would not stop talking about this film. I have it signed by the Spanish voice actor because yes, I knew the cast in English, I knew the cast in the Spanish voiceover, I knew the director of photography, I knew everything. This is a special interest. I was going to do an example of a repetitive behavior, but I accidentally did it not long ago while filming, so I'll just cue that video because it's natural and it's not me faking it. Cue! Now those two are the main symptoms of autism, but we have a couple that still need to be happening in order to consider a diagnosis. So first of all, as we've established, these symptoms need to be present during early childhood. However, this does not mean that the kid has to be super hyper autistic from day one. It just means that some of the symptoms can somehow be seen when they were young. Because autistic people, we do this thing called masking, which is basically hiding our symptoms from other people. So if we're really good at doing that, it's really possible that you don't notice we're autistic. And the DSM has that fact of masking into consideration in this diagnosis. So maybe you don't realize someone is autistic or they don't realize they're autistic until the expectations that they are facing right now exceed their capabilities. Now, another criteria is that these symptoms need to be clinically significant. What does this mean? That it needs to actually really be impairing other areas of life, like work, social life, or other important areas of current functioning. And last but not least, these symptoms cannot be explained by anything else. Say, for example, a drug. So these are the criteria needed to be diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. Inside of it, we find 3 levels of severity. These levels are based on the support that the autistic person needs. Level 1 is requires support. Level 2 refers to requires substantial support. And then level 3 we have requires very substantial support. If you've noticed, every level of autism requires support. That means all autistic people will need help. I cannot talk about this without saying my opinion. I think this should only be used by healthcare professionals, because when it's not used by them, or it's used by people who don't actually explain what these levels of severity entail, it can spread misinformation. People may think that someone with autism level 3 is more autistic than someone with an autism level 1, when it's not like that. There's no such thing of being more or less autistic. We are autistic, full stop. It also can spread misinformation and can lead people to think that if someone is autistic level 1, they're not gonna need help or they are fine. It's like, oh, your autism is not that severe, it's great. It's not like that. We need to remember the lowest severity of autism still needs help. And this concludes that part of the video talking about what is autism through science. Now I'm going to explain autism from an autistic person POV, but just keep in mind everything that's said in science also applies. So it is actually quite hard to explain exactly what autism is following a very neatly done path as we did with the scientific bit. So I apologize if the following takes are a little bit random or messy. I want you to imagine 2 houses, one next to each other. They look the same, but they were actually built by 2 different builders. When you go to either of these houses, it's all pretty much the same. It has a living room, has a kitchen, has some bedrooms, bathrooms. It's all great. I could even go as far as to say that if I got you inside of one of the houses, you wouldn't even realize which one you're in just by looking around, because it looks the same, doesn't it? And I want you to think of a house, but not the house itself. What's inside of it? Still, not the rooms, inside of the wall. I want you to think of all of the wires that make the light function, make the internet function, that gives electricity to the TV, all those wires. So what these 2 builders did is that the way they sort the cables for their own houses, it's a little bit different. But hey, houses work. Yes, sure that when you go to one, the doorbell kind of it's a bit late. And when you go to another one, the light is a little bit bright. But essentially, how does this work? Now this is autism. One house is a neurotypical brain, another house is an autistic brain. We're the same, we're just wired differently. Our brain is wired differently. Autism is another way of perceiving the world around us. It's another way of interacting with each other, of interacting with the world, even with ourselves. Autism has its good things and it also has its bad things. Do you remember the two houses? How I told you that they presumably look the exact same at first glance? Well, it is like this because autism is an invisible disability. If you see me without knowing I'm autistic, I'm sure your first thought is not, oh my god, that one's autistic, I found the autistic one. You're just gonna think I'm normal. You're just gonna think I'm neurotypical. Before someone comes at me being like, oh no, but autism is not a disability, autism is great, autism is not, yeah. Yes, it is a disability, and there's nothing wrong with saying autism is a disability. Not saying it's not going to make it stop being one. And I know a lot of people have troubles with saying that autism is a disability. It may sound scary, especially if it's your kid that's autistic, but we will cope, we will learn. It's gonna be more difficult for us, but not acknowledging that it is a disability. In fact, it is one of the most disabling disorders. It's gonna be worse for us if we don't realize this. Denying this is worse for us. Another aspect of autism is that sometimes it feels like when everyone's born, they are given a book with the instructions of how everything works, how social interactions work, how the world works, the expectations you're gonna have at every different context ever in your life. It just so happens that when it was my turn, they ran out of copies, so I don't have one. But the thing is, everyone else thinks I do. So if I don't act accordingly to those standards, everyone's gonna be looking at me a little bit weird. So being autistic is a constant figuring out all of these unspoken social rules that are everywhere that just we're not born with them. Autism also has good things. It's not all bad. For example, there's this thing that we have that is called autistic joy. And now let me tell you, I feel bad for the neurotypicals. Why? Autistic joy, for me, is the highest level of joy and happiness anyone could ever achieve. So if you're not autistic, I have some bad news. We autistic people tend to get very excited about the things that we're very excited about. Like for example, me with my film. Don't get me started. I will just be so happy. See, I'm not faking. I'm genuinely getting excited just by remembering this film. So it's just like a burst of energy, of being super happy that a lot of the times when you're done with it, you're like, what has just happened to me? So much happiness, so much energy. We jump, we wiggle the hands. It's so great. It's so liberating. And the fact that not everyone gets that, and I really do feel bad for the people who do not get to experience this. Another thing that's not mentioned in the DSM is that we tend to have a stronger sense of justice. Now, to be honest, this can be both good and bad, but I think it's quite cool. And also we are great at finding patterns. Remember when we said we like structure, order, routine? We have a better pattern recognition system. So you know when you're watching a film and there's someone who just goes, oh yeah, that one's the killer, and you're like 5 minutes into the film, well, that's your neurodivergent friend. We're able to know the little details and notice the patterns and therefore arrive to the conclusion before other people do. And that's quite cool as well. And it's not all feeling bad. I think this is also a good moment to talk about not only what autism is, but to briefly mention that with being autistic comes also something that I like to call the autistic experience, which is things that are not symptoms of autism, but it turns out that if you talk with other autistic people, they're gonna be like, oh, I do that, or ooh, that happened to me. I'm saying this way too happy for the things I'm about to say, because the things that came first to mind are, we're victims of bullying, we feel alone, we feel misunderstood. I'm laughing not to cry. I saw a post online of someone saying, do you guys also feel as if every day you're cosplaying as a human? And another person replied, no dude, you're just autistic, which really sums up this part of the autism experience. I can't finish this video without saying that in the same sense that every neurotypical person is not the same, us autistic people, we are not the same. We have some core characteristics that define us in some ways, but not every autistic person is the same, because not every person is the same. At the end of the day, we're all our own person. I hope I answered your questions about what is autism, although I'm thinking we did talk about what autism is, but we didn't talk about its surname, right? Autism spectrum disorder. We call autism a spectrum. What do we mean by that? Are you sure you know what we mean by that? Well, stay tuned for the next video to find out. Bye! I lied. This is not the end of the video. You know how I say science is important? Well, what I've been talking about in this video is actually based on some scientific articles I've read. And maybe, if you're like me, you're gonna want to read them. Today's your lucky day. I have put down in the description of this video a link. This link will take you to a folder. In this folder, you will find all of the articles that I've used to make this video. And because I'm autistic and I love order, I have created an Excel where I would write the name of the video with the names of the articles that I've used, so it's easier for you to find which is which. I hope you like that. No, for real. Bye! It's signed. It's actually here. It's signed by Mario Garcia. I love him so much. This concludes the talking about what autism is from a tiki. I am now going to read